4 things that people can do. It can make or break a portfolio. For number 1, we've got the world of SMSF.
SMSF is a massive opportunity. People have so much borrowing power that they didn't really know about.
2, personal liabilities.
This is probably the first thing you can look at to improve your borrowing power because it's something you can change quite quickly.
Number 3, structuring.
It's a very good way to preserve your borrowing power and to provide options with regards to going into an owner-occ or transitioning into commercial.
4, the final one, different tiers of banks and different policies. There are some game changers here that people just don't know about.
Too often I see people miss out on growing their portfolio more than what they thought they could. In this episode, we're going to talk about 4 ways to unlock your borrowing capacity and continue to grow your portfolio. Let's get into it.
Nerd alert! Property Nerds, the home for data-driven property investors, where we uncover Australia's hot and cold markets, latest headlines and trends.
Welcome to another episode of the Property Nerds podcast, guys. And Jack, thank you so much for today's intro. We're talking all things finance. And as we know, in the world of finance, yes, strategy plays a key part too, but those extra X factors from unlocking a bit of borrowing capacity, it can make or break a portfolio. Like you could be needing 4 to hit a certain goal and you might be at 3. And that next one is the difference between maybe 5, 6, 7 years of holding time or having all the assets you need to hit a goal. So Jack, I'm really keen to pick your brain on these 4 ways or 4 things that people can do when it comes to unlocking their borrowing capacity. For number 1, we've got the world of SMSF.
Yep.
Why and how does SMSF actually even unlock extra borrowing capacity?
Yeah, so if you've got a portfolio outside of SMSF, you're obviously using your normal PAYG income. Your super contributions aren't taken into account when looking at your borrowing power in that regard. So with SMSF, you've got your 12% mandatory contributions from your employer. All of that goes towards servicing an investment portfolio within that other entity. So yeah, it can unlock, for some people, it can be $1 million worth of property. So
wow,
that over a 20-year period is life-changing. So it's not whether or not you should do your SMSF or not. It's a combination of both, because if you do have a good SMSF strategy, it's going to influence your decisions when you're in retirement. So SMSF is a massive way that people, it's a big opportunity. People have so much borrowing power that they didn't really know about. It's right there.
Yeah, so I'm going to make it real simple, but before I do, I just want to make sure I'm getting this understanding right. So essentially what we're saying is borrowing capacity is going to be separate in the SMSF because it's relying on contributions and rental income. Is that part right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then that means that hypothetically, if someone spoke to Adrian and the team in strategy, had 4 properties and maybe they haven't deployed the rest of the tips from today, but let's just say they've now maxed out.
Yeah.
And if they did have the right super balance, obviously the right financial advice to say, yes, it makes sense for SMSF to be a vehicle in the journey, and then they were looking at their borrowing capacity, it would be completely separate to what's in personal.
Yeah, your personal assets and liabilities in most cases wouldn't hold you back in regards to your borrowing power within SMSF, because again, your super contributions that are mandatory, that are already being paid by your employer, that's not being used to service your debts outside of super. So it's money that's already going to super that can service the loan repayments as well as the rental income.
Yeah, got it. Now, Jack, I want to ask, when it comes to super, there's obviously the contributions the employer makes.
Yep.
What about if you're in a position to make extra contributions? Does that improve your servicing? How does that factor into things?
Yeah, so that's when your personal assets and liabilities can affect your additional borrowing power in super, because there is some level of additional or proposed additional contributions where they do look at your assets and liabilities in your personal name, and that can, you've got your mandatory contributions, but if you wanted to allocate a certain amount of additional contributions, then they can look at your assets and liabilities personally to see if you have capacity to make those extra contributions. And if you're self-employed as well, and you're brand new self-employed, there's a lot more flexibility in regards to proposed contributions, because obviously you've just started a new business. You wouldn't have contributions going in maybe if it's the first 12 months.
Well, that's actually a big one, man, because many business owners, even in non-SMSF, they make this mistake, or they make this thinking I haven't been in business long enough. I've only been in business for just kicked off. Yeah. But what you're saying is, hey, I know it's just kicked off, But at the end of the day, if you have certain checks and things that can be passed personally or contributions that you can make, the bank's still willing to entertain SMSF lending for you.
On prime rates, and like you'd look at if you're a brand new business trying to get a loan, like as a low doc or an alt doc, they'll take you for a ride. There'll be risk fees, there'll be high
like,
rates.
Hey, no one else is giving you money. We'll charge you a lot more for it.
But in SMSF, for some reason, they're quite happy to give you prime lending, really reasonable products. So, and that's for brand new self-employed. So it's pretty interesting.
Now, Adrian, you see a lot of portfolio plans when it comes to the world of SMSF. Is it becoming a lot more popular than usual? Is servicing playing a big part in it?
It definitely is. I think nowadays that we are seeing, people come and build their portfolios, not just, making their first purchase, but doing multiple purchases as they continue the journey. Like you said, if they haven't implemented some of the other steps, they do naturally get capped out a little bit on, the borrowing side of things. And then you sort of look what you can sort of shuffle and do within their personal, but then you also have this great opportunity within SMSF that if they've got the balance, if they've got the strong income coming in, it's another way that they can just really expand the portfolio. And like Jack said, it doesn't have to be sort of this completely separate thing that you look at. You can do your personal, you can also do your SMSF on the side, and they can go in parallel. So we're seeing a lot more of it, especially given interest rates have increased, borrowing capacity is getting a lot harder. The other side that we probably haven't touched on is the cash flow side of things, where people naturally, as they borrow more debt, it gets harder for them to service. And given this money comes out of contributions, it doesn't really affect their personal cash flow as well. So a lot of people are definitely exploring it and really charging along to get that extra, 1 or 2 properties in their portfolio.
That's actually a big point, because if it's like on the cash flow side, we forget whilst we are in lowering interest rate environments, we're still at high interest rate environments. And so if someone personally is unable to service that and they don't want their lifestyle to be heavily impacted, contributions, rental income, separate entity from pre-tax income that's not flowing through to your everyday lifestyle, that all servicing and holding it, plus a certain buffer in case you've got a deposit in the SMSF that you're not using all of it for the purchase, there is leftover buffer. I can see the attraction behind so many people wanting to do it, because it's like, I want to use leverage, I want to buy property, but I don't want it to impact my lifestyle.
Yeah. I think obviously when the rates were going up pretty quickly, I think that forced people into investing with their SMSF because they hit their borrowing power limits. But while it took a bit of time for the banks to adjust their policy to allow people to borrow again, but also when people get to a point where they've bought multiple properties in the last, say, 12 to 24 months, and they're in a period where they're like holding, say, I'm not going to do anything for the next 6 to 12 months due to lack of equity, or just, in a period where they're just holding. A lot of times they would look then, so in the meantime, maybe I'll just do something with my SMSF. I do see that come up a fair bit.
Yeah, really good point. Now, Jack, when it comes to SMSFs, I also want to understand one more thing, the cash required. Now, people seem to think that you always need a 20% deposit. But if I'm not mistaken, there are some lenders who are also doing 90% SMSF loans, meaning you can now diversify your cash in more ways because you're not putting it all towards property with the less deposit, or you can put it in offset accounts, or you can look at having a bigger buffer. Does 90% exist in SMSF residential lending?
It does. It's mainly for high income earners though, because it's kind of restricting you in the way that you can allocate proposed additional contributions.
Got it.
It's more like your mandatory contributions, and there's still no liquidity requirement, but there's less flexibility in regards to improving your borrowing power. That's why it's pretty much got to rest solely on the mandatory contributions. And we do it. It's really a lot of times when you have a high income earner, typically you have a decent enough balance. It's really for the people that I really want to be aggressive with that purchase, but you've got to take into account the fact that there is going to be their version of LMI, like the lender risk fee. So 90%, it's like 2.5 or 3.5% of the total purchase price, and then at 85%, it's 2.5%. Okay. So it is a pretty significant cost, and we rarely have to do it. It's mainly for, sometimes you get people that have come to Australia and have been working but maybe 5 years, they've got a low super balance but really high income. There is an opportunity for them to maximize that purchase price using those high LVR strategies.
So SMSF, that's one out of the 4 things we're going to cover off today as a way to extend the borrowing capacity. Before we jump on to number 2, I just want to understand here, make sure we've got this recap right. Servicing is separate from the personal side, allowing you to get that extra wind or an extra asset in the portfolio. The next thing is there's 80 and 90% LVRs, depending on the income side. Other thing that you've talked about is self-employed applicants. They don't actually have to wait for the whole 1 or 2 years to get their financials in order. And then also when it comes to it, extra contributions could push the servicing to higher borrowing amounts again, and that would expand the portfolio further. But then the fifth thing is one thing we didn't cover off, but if I'm not mistaken, no majors are operating in the actual SMSF space. So you really need a good broker and you really need someone on your team. So Jack, I know you guys do this day in, day out at 4Acre Financial. How can people reach out to the team at 4Acre Financial from an SMSF specific perspective?
Yeah, so just go to 4acrefinancial.com.au and you can book in a link with the team there.
Awesome. Now let's get into number 2. Personal liabilities. What does that even mean?
Quick wins, like personal liabilities. This is probably the first thing you can look at to improve your borrowing power because it's something you can change quite quickly.
Yeah.
Credit card limits. You can reduce your credit card limits. Buy now, pay later. I know you're not paying interest on it, and it's not like it's quite small liabilities along the way, but there's something you can change overnight and be done with it. So those types of things are something you can really just change overnight. Car loans, personal loans. These are loans that aren't as daunting as a mortgage, but they are on a much shorter loan term. So typically getting rid of those things or consolidating them over a 30-year loan term could really increase your borrowing power.
Yeah.
So these are things that probably things that you would look at first rather than tackling some of the other bigger issues. But
so these are the things that you can quickly cut and they make an overnight difference
straight away
on your borrowing capacity.
You could even put in an application on the promise to the bank that they'll approve it on the basis you do those things.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So now I want to understand, just to give the numbers to light, let's talk about a credit card. Let's talk about a car loan. What sort of numbers do they actually hurt the portfolio by? If we're talking a car loan, a credit card, or even buy now, pay later, how much does this pull you back?
So to put it in simple terms, it's not really about, a 20K credit card would be a property or a 50K personal loan would be a full property. It's more a 20K credit card would be the difference between 150K or 200K cash out with a major bank versus having to go to a third tier lender for that refinancing cash out. So it's more about just getting you into a better lender option before you have to go to those third tier lender options a bit sooner.
Yeah, Adrian, this is a big one because, if we're talking car loans and things like that, like Jack said, it might not be the difference for the whole next property, but you've seen people's portfolios day in, day out, and you've seen people have to refinance their whole portfolio from a 5.5 to 6% interest rate.
Yep.
All of a sudden to 6.5 to 7.5, just because those things weren't there closed off to get that cash out from their equity. You've mapped out portfolios and cash flows. How big of an impact can that be?
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. And Jack, you sort of mentioned that it might have been just a 150 or 200K cash out, but that ultimately can be another property realistically when it comes down to it. So if I were to, do rough numbers off the top of my head, we're talking, I don't know, an extra 600K property. Don't know if you guys know the rule of 72.
No, what's the rule of 72?
So it's basically you have the number 72, whatever number you divide it by, it'll give you a resulting number, which in theory should figure out the years of how long something takes to double.
Yeah.
As an example. So if I took 6% growth, 72 divided by 6, we're talking about 12 years. That's probably how long it takes for a property to double. So 600K property, you'd be missing out on an extra 600K after 12 years. And that could have just been that car loan that Jack was talking about.
Not the Ford. I heard somewhere that Ford or Toyota Hilux in the month of June were the two most popular cars. So the Hiluxes aren't cheap, mate.
Nah.
Everyone thinks Toyotas are cheap. They're great value. My dad's a Toyota tattooed on his left chest as a mechanic of many years. He goes, mate, I don't see them. So when you don't see them, other than your normal regos and green slips and stuff, it's a good sign, right? It's a good sign. But definitely the car loans, personal loans. But Jack, I want to go to the other side of personal liabilities or personal expenses. And this is not so much the liability side, but the day-to-day living. I'm talking about renting, the way you rent, whether it's living at home, an eastern suburbs unit on your own versus sharing with others, and even just rent vesting. How do these things shake up borrowing capacity?
Yeah, so rent vesting would lower your debt to income ratio versus having your own owner-occupied property and having debt associated to that doesn't have a rental income. So rent vesting can help with your debt-to-income ratio if that's a problem. But renting can also provide the flexibility of, if we had a property that we're renting together, we could kind of isolate our portion of the rent expense, and that could massively improve your borrowing power. Like there's a lot of flexible strategies there with major lenders. So
you're saying we go to a mansion at $1,800 a week, us three share it, and that's $600 each.
I mean, imagine having that mortgage, and you wouldn't be able to split.
Probably be like $3,000-4,000 a week if that was the mortgage, right?
And you wouldn't be able to split it up the same way if it was a mortgage. Like it's much easier to split up a rental expense with third parties than it is joint liabilities. So private health insurance is another one that we see is quite, like, some people will pay like $500 a month on private health insurance, and I'm like,
what does that equate to in a borrowing capacity? That's not small, because $500 a month
it's a lot.
is a decent shake up.
It's at least a deposit for a house.
Wow.
And I wonder, like, I sometimes ask people, like, what do you use that for? Like physio, massage. I'm like, okay, cool. Like it's about $50 maybe for a massage,
to kill your borrowing capacity,
or $50 or for physio. Like, how often are you really going? Like, I'll go when I'm injured, but I'm not injured every single month to go and use up those things. Like,
no, we're not saying go and kill your private health cover, right? And like go and hurt your.
I am.
Go and hurt your, good hospital coverages and all that sort of stuff. But I guess the main thing is just having awareness.
Yeah.
If you know where the dials are, you can make the shifts that you want with intention and actually know it. But like living at home,
100%.
That's not a small one. Like, and I think,
but that's a sacrifice in your lifestyle. It's huge though. Like, actually,
not if you want a full fridge all the time. Like, living at home was some of my best times ever.
That's it, right? Not only does it get rid of your rent expense, but it also gets rid of a lot of other living expenses, like utilities. A lot of the times, your parents will cover that, food, things like that. Things that you don't really think about from an affordability perspective. Living at home with your parents is going to save you a lot of money. And that's going to have a direct impact on not only your borrowing power, but your affordability, your ability to buy more property. So in the short term, if you can make that sacrifice, it's definitely going to get you ahead. I mean, I did it. I lived with my parents till I was like 26, and then I got married and my wife got pregnant. So kind of had to move out. So
loving the show and keen to invest? Well, book your free discovery call and we'll actually walk you through how to build a high growth portfolio without all the guesswork. Just jump onto the link in the show notes or visit investorkit.com.au to book your discovery call. And now let's get back into the show. Adrian, on the whole living arrangements, do you get clients often come up and go, okay, we bought our investment, it's year one. We've done the review in year two. And then there could be this pathway they follow to set themselves up. Like it could be literally year two investments, year three, final investment. And in 3 years, they've set up the trajectory for their financial future when it comes to their wealth that they're wanting to build and the end long-term passive income. But in comes this, we call it the little gremlin, right? From our little end of financial year catch up we had and learning about the thoughts in people's minds. Buy your home. Stop the investment. It's now time to get the home. Otherwise, Sydney's going to get pricey. Don't do that. Don't reinvest. These voices come up and conversations shift, timelines shift. Like, what's the impact to that on a portfolio?
Can have a pretty big impact, honestly, because when you think about what you're doing financially, it's, if we talk about the PPOR, it's always the emotional decision. That ultimately is what it is. We can talk numbers and everything like that. But if someone wants to buy their home and they're set on that, then it's an emotional decision. What we can do is sort of talk about the financial implications of what happens, which is usually, if we're talking, Sydney siders especially, high price point, very expensive, massive loan that they have to take out, given they've only had, a year or two building up their portfolio. They're going to use all of their savings, equity, borrowing capacity on that one purchase, and they're going to get stuck.
And it might not work out as good as they thought, because I've had clients that when rates were 2%, they bought a $2.5 million property at 70% LVR thinking, oh, here we go. And then rates go up to 5.5%, 6% and they have to sell anyway. Like I've seen that so much, man.
Yeah. And they wouldn't have had enough time considering stamp duty. Like even if it grew a little bit, stamp duty would have been almost $150K plus. So it's like that's used up a fair bit of chunk. And then selling it, there could have been $300K in transactional costs just from like selling it, stamp duty, taxes, anything like that. Maybe not in their home and the taxes, but at least $200K plus in transactional costs just to like get in, get out for something that's not long lasting.
Yeah.
I always think like we actually had Danny, a case study of ours, in terms of a client who's been on this podcast and shared her journey. And I always say these two things. Number one is 4 to 7 years of hard sacrifice to build a portfolio between 3 to 5 properties could game change your entire financial future. And that is a live example. Just go and check out her case study and see her journey, her story that she shared. She'd bought a property in Brisbane, Adelaide, regional New South Wales, and regional Queensland. $3.5 million in assets over a 4-year journey with us. That was her saying no every year to this, I'm going to get this home. I'm going to go and get this property. And both her and her partner, Ron, were in the capacity to go and do that. But they're like, no, just 4 years of hard focus. Now you take that $3.5 million of assets, you compound it out. They're both in their 30s. So you take it out to their 60s. You look at their growth journey of super, which isn't something we advise them on. The super's their journey, right? But super, property, personal incomes, everything, they put this together. And all of a sudden they're like, wait, we're happy. We're content with this. This gets us our long-term income. So what do? They drew a line and they're like, I'm going to focus on my home now. So now instead of going, which leads me to the second point, instead of just that 4 to 7 year sacrifice, let's not think of just how tough that will be, but just think of going now for the rest of the working life or the rest of the family life and deciding what you want to do. You just have one thing to focus on. That's the home. Whether that's in different cities, different locations, try before you buy as a rent investor. It's just an isolated focus on finance rather than you asking yourself this question, would you like to catch up on your income and wealth goals, or would you like to catch up on one home? One home. And everyone asks that question goes, I don't want to catch up on my income and wealth goals. I don't want to be in my 50s wondering if I'll be okay with my 60s. I want to know in my 20s and 30s that I've set myself up and I'm going to be okay in my 60s. Now let's go have fun, travel, lifestyle, maybe pursue that job and career that you were thinking of that you wanted to, but you thought the risks behind it were a bit too high, but that's okay. I'm set. I'm okay. I'm going to go for it. So it's just amazing what that personal liabilities thing that we're talking about, that sacrifice, that tighten the belt, doesn't have to be 2-minute noodles, but actually look, if you pop a fried egg, a couple of spring onions, some fish flakes, whatever you do it, chuck that on 2-minute noodles, like a 5-star noodles, Michelin star actually. But that's probably as bad as it'll get. But everything else, when you cut well, sacrifice for 4 to 7 years, you built plans for days and you see this, you're like game changer.
Yeah.
But that's number 2. Number 3, structuring.
Yeah.
Very technical and fancy world, but give us the actual just summarized version of this.
Yeah. So, I mean, for most investors, I guess borrowing power comes up as a problem for a lot of them. Structuring is basically not buying things in your personal name. And this could be very impactful for people that don't have their owner occ yet, but want it in the future. By buying something in a trust with a corporate trustee, it's going to give that flexibility to preserve their borrowing power in their personal name for when they do want to buy that property. That's a very common scenario that we see. But also, if you know that you're buying these residential properties and you're one day going to exit out of them to enter into a commercial property, then there's some tax advantages on the way out of selling residential portfolios that are owned in a trust. So there's it's a bottomless pit of strategies when you talk about buying properties within trusts and what it can provide you with preserving your borrowing power in a separate trust or in your personal name, transitioning into commercial property at the, saving as much money, not having to pay too much tax. So yeah, we could have a whole episode dedicated to that, but it's a very, very good way to preserve your borrowing power and to provide options with regards to going into an owner occ or transitioning into commercial.
On the trust structuring part, or just structuring in general, this is another thing not to rely on the bank or your bank to speak to or your majors to speak to, because their policies, not all of them have the same policies that allow for it. So it might just be like, oof, not normal to them. It really needs structured investment specialized brokers.
I mean, I know that's the case because like we've had clients that are bankers and they have no idea what this is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. They would know what their bank's policy is, but from a strategic point of view, what it all means, like, it's just not taught.
I mean, it might not also just be bankers. To be honest, I've talked to a lot of brokers who also don't know about it.
As well. A lot of brokers don't even know. I mean, Adrian, one thing coming back to Danny's point though, is that you need to also be clear about your goals.
Yep.
Because in her case, she knew that 4 properties was going to do it. And they don't want to have a whole bunch of properties. right? They want to know that they're set. And then if they choose to later on, they can. So for them, the foreign personal names they felt made sense because there was the gearing, there was the deductions, there was the high leverage, there was the lowering in costs, and then they knew they wanted to cap off at 4. Would you say it's more like a strategy for those who actively and knowingly want to build an aggressive portfolio rather than just every single person go and do this?
Yeah, when it comes to structuring, there's always the intent or the plan that you have to keep in mind. You'll notice like what Jack was saying, it was, this is great for investors who do this, such as, purchase resis, go into sell and then go into commercial, or this is for an investor who is looking to eventually purchase their home where borrowing capacity is an issue. So you notice everything he said is always talking about the future plan in mind. And that's very much how it is for structuring and trust, where you have to have that conversation of, if I'm talking to someone who goes, hey, you just need to purchase 2, you'll hit your goals. There's no point going into the trust. You're just creating unnecessary structuring and fees that they have to pay for no benefit. And that probably put them in a worse position. But for a lot of people, as you've mentioned, for aggressive investors, for people who naturally go throughout their journey and they do get capped within borrowing capacity, and that becomes the one limitation to them actually getting to their goals, it's definitely necessary and that's something that needs to be discussed if they're actually trying to reach that goal there.
Yeah, big time. And I think what you've just touched on, Adrian, actually leads me to the next point. It's actually the right sequencing. You need to make sure the sequencing's on point because I feel people get the sequencing of who their advisory team should be for finance wrong. They go to accountant first. Accountant speaks solely from a tax outcome. They go to the, or if they're not from a tax outcome, there's a bias outcome of like trust getting them more fees versus not getting them more fees, depending on who your accountant is, right? But then you go to the buyer's agent and the buyer's agent will go everything in one way, or don't worry about structure, let's just get the deal done. And then if you go to a finance professional who doesn't know what it is, then they're going to go and basically go dismiss it and go, oh, no, it's not that important. No, you can't really do that at the banks. Just keep on purchasing. So you need to firstly, in my opinion, this is the perfect sequencing. Number 1, speak to the savvy team that knows how to do it from a finance perspective. So that's you guys at Foraker Financial. When you speak to Foraker Financial, you go, okay, I've set myself a finance strategy. You need to go to the buying team next in terms of the buyer's agency and the strategist team and Adrian, your team going, where do I want to take this portfolio? Am I a less is more person? Do I want to have a balance of certain deductions before I go into this world? Do I have a servicing amount that's strong enough with what my team at Foraker said to get a couple before I transition over? Actually, you know what? No, I'm a bit anti-risk or anti-debt. I saw the plan with Adrian and the team and I got to 3 or 4 places and I'm going to be okay. I don't want to go too hardcore into certain structures. Or no, I do want to build something more prolific. Okay, I understand the property impact. I understand where I can get my finance and how to sequence it. Hey, accountant, I'd like your formal advice. I'd like to discuss structure. I'd like to do pros and cons. I don't need your opinion on the finance side. That is not your world. I don't need your opinion on the property side. That is not your world. What I'd like to do is the pros and cons of the assets to ensure I'm making a holistic financial decision, knowing everything I need on the pros and cons of the trust, that is, shall I not, and get the recommended advice. And so if you get this opinion wrong, you go into a world that always says maybe yes, or you go into a world that doesn't explain it clearly enough with the finance tangibles and the property tangibles, and then you get your advice wrong. So the key is get with finance first, then go to decide your portfolio position now that you know the finance ways, and then you go to your accountant for that formal advice to set it up or not set it up. And so I think that's a key point. So structuring, trusts, different entities, different bank versus broker thought again. But let's go to number 4, the final one. Different tiers of banks and different policies. Now, this is huge because it really depends on who you are and what you need. But there are some game changers here that people just don't know about. What are some of those game changers on policies that get people that extra wind on borrowing capacity?
So as a rule of thumb, we try to keep the majority of the debt with a major bank. So that it's prime funding, there's easy access to money, good cash out policies, like low cost of valuation. Because once you start getting into third tier lender space, you pretty much, you have higher rates, you have to pay for every single valuation. So if as a rule of thumb, majority of the debt is with a major bank and the cash outs are the same, once you start going into the purchasing and you go with a third tier lender, even then that's not forever. You've also got, at least 12 months of just rental income growth across the portfolio, potentially some income growth as well, a bonus, something like that. Then you can get that debt back to a major bank, get the cash out with them as well, and then go back to a third tier lender again.
So it's almost like shuffling, but
Yeah.
knowing when to shuffle. It's like, stay here because it's as cheap as possible. It's easy to manage the banking apps, the fees and all that. But then you got to know when to pivot and then when to come back.
Because I've seen people go way, way too aggressive, and they're like third tier lender, bang, bang, bang. And then they're like, okay, well now I can't do anything. And there's no recycling process. It's like, I've done it all. I'm all there and I'm stuck for like literally years. So by having that recycling process back to major bank to third tier.
And they're stuck at the most horrible interest rates.
Mate, it's bad because like with third tier lenders, you can get, most major banks with a 3% buffer on existing rates and the one you're applying for. You can go to third tier lenders that have no assessment buffer on existing debts, even if it's interest only, and 1% assessment rate on the debt you're applying for. You could even look at lenders that have like a 40-year loan term on the debt
Adrian,
you're applying
going to be
for.
in strategy team 40 years from now going, all right, 80th birthday, or sorry, I made you extra too old just then, like 70th birthday, and he's in there cutting his 70th cakes, like team strategy, 40-year term. So Jack, me and Adrian see this again and again. And it's like, it's tough because people go and have their mate who is the broker, someone they know, friend's friend. And hypothetically, it's a fair statement to say like everyone might have access to similar lenders. But this just proves again that it's not about the access to lender. It's the knowledge of who to use, when to use it, the sequencing. Because that broker, their friend of theirs, like we're like, oh no, they just put all 4 of their properties with that bank.
Yeah.
They're super stuck.
I mean, I have sympathy for that. Like, I try to help. Sometimes I've been in positions like that where I've actually tried to help them with their broker and say, look, do this, do that. But I think the worst outcome is when you're dealing with a bank directly. No offense to CBA, but like just the bias in regards to the structuring or the cross securitization or P&I versus interest only, like the bias is very clear.
Cross securitization's a big one. Like everyone just chucks it together, goes, I just didn't want to do 10 loan files. Yeah. Didn't want to do 8 loan files.
There's no good reason. There's no good reason. But the bias is real, dealing direct versus dealing with a broker, because they have a bias to put you on principal and interest for all your loans because you're gonna have better borrowing power with them. Whereas with a broker, we're not too concerned about that because towards the back end, we can, by having interest only loans, it actually improves your borrowing power and your affordability. So yeah, that alone is another policy. So you've got like loan terms, 40 years, 30 years, interest only servicing, which many of the banks can't do if you're not with the right one. And then there's also varying assessment rates. But another big one is how people make their income. People tuning into the show, we speak to people from many different backgrounds. Some on bonus, some on overtime, some on commissions, some on casual, some are working part-time and then they have a second opportunity, second job. I've seen all sorts. I've seen one person have like 3 full-time jobs. Like it was wild. I've seen like crazy stuff happen all over. And this is how we make our money because we have like, you could have lenders that'll need 2 years of bonuses. We have lenders that can just do it on 1. Lenders that'll look at 2 years of commissions. Lenders that'll look at year-to-date commissions. Allowances shaded at 80% or all incomes not shaded at all. So this is where a broker justifies their existence basically. Like not only from a policy perspective, but using that to enhance your borrowing power, like that's where the magic happens.
Game changer. So we've got tiers of banks and understanding policy, structuring and having that right on, personal liabilities, which ones to cut or in the mansion that we'll all rent one day together, Property Nerds go and overseas podcast or something like that. And then we've also got the SMSF, the 4th one. Those are 4 ways to really level up your borrowing capacity. Jack, as always, thank you so much. And once again, for those who aren't aware, but these obviously aren't just go speak to your broker. It's about the right one. How can people reach out to the team?
fouracrefinancial.com.au. You can easily book in a link with someone in the team there.
Awesome. Now, to everyone tuning in, we love doing episodes like this because it's an opportunity to go deep into the finance tips that you just don't often hear at the barbecue. And if you are hearing it at the barbecue, you're probably hearing it the wrong ones. And so when you have chats like today with our fellow nerd Jack, it's an opportunity to really level up your finances. We want to help you with the right property, but that doesn't happen if you don't have the right finance to unlock the capacity for the next purchase. And so you combine the right team on strategy, you combine the right property and data with the right finances and the right approach, the game-changing effects to your portfolio are clear. So reach out to the team at fouracrefinancial.com.au and speak to Jack's team to be able to understand where the elements are missing on the finance strategy perspective. It's not just about getting the most you can borrow for this next one, but it's finance strategy, how you can look at the next one, the one after, and get unstuck. So that's it from us at the Property Nerds, and tune into another episode where we go deeper into finance in more episodes like this. Thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. To hear more like this and to help us spread the word, don't forget to leave us a rating and follow along for our next episode.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Game over.